The following content is for educational analysis of military tactics and is based on publicly available information and hypothetical scenarios. At 4:47 a.m. on November 23, 2024, a Chinese Type 055 destroyer locked its fire control radar onto the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's newest $13 billion aircraft carrier. What happened next stunned military analysts worldwide. Within 18 seconds, three things occurred simultaneously. The Ford's electronic warfare suite fried every circuit on the Chinese destroyer. 6 F-35C stealth fighters materialized out of nowhere above the Chinese fleet, and a Virginia-class submarine surfaced just 800 meters behind the destroyer with torpedo doors open. The entire Chinese naval task force, 5 warships worth $8 billion, found themselves completely defenseless in less than a minute. This wasn't luck. This was a demonstration of why the U.S. Navy remains the undisputed master of the Pacific. And the footage you're about to see proves it. Before we dive into how the U.S. Navy turned the tables on China's most advanced warship, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, do you think China expected this level of response? Now, let's rewind to the moment that triggered one of the most sophisticated naval operations of the decade. November 23, 2024. The Taiwan Strait. Water temperature, 18 degrees Celsius. Sea state, moderate with 2-meter swells. Perfect conditions for naval operations. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the crown jewel of American naval power, was conducting what the Pentagon called routine freedom of navigation operations. 95 nautical miles east of Taiwan. At $13 billion, she's the most expensive warship ever built. Her electromagnetic aircraft launch system can hurl a 45,000-pound Super Hornet into the sky every 45 seconds. Her dual A-1B nuclear reactors generate enough power to light up a city of 100,000 people. But on this morning, the Ford wasn't alone. Shadowing her from 12 nautical miles away was the Nanchang, China's most advanced Type 055 destroyer. At 13,000 tons and armed with 112 vertical launch cells, the Nanchang represents Beijing's ambition to challenge American naval supremacy. Her Type 346B Dragon Eye radar can track over 40 targets simultaneously at ranges exceeding 450 kilometers. Intelligence reports later revealed that the Nanchang wasn't just observing. She was leading a 5-ship task force, including 2 Type 052D destroyers, the Hefei and Yinchuan, and 2 Type 054A frigates. Combined value of this flotilla, over $8 billion in Chinese naval assets. At precisely 4:47 a.m., something changed. The Nanchang's fire control radar, the Type 366, suddenly went active and locked onto the Ford. In naval terms, this is one step below firing a weapon. It's the maritime equivalent of pointing a loaded gun at someone's head. Inside the Ford's Combat Information Center, alarms screamed. The ship's AN/SLQ-32V6 electronic warfare suite immediately identified the threat. Active fire control radar bearing 287 degrees, range 11.8 nautical miles. Captain Sarah Mitchell had less than 30 seconds to make a decision. Under standard rules of engagement, a fire control radar lock is considered a hostile act. But launching a counterstrike could trigger World War III. What the Chinese didn't know was that the Ford had been expecting this. For the past 72 hours, a Virginia-class attack submarine, the USS New Jersey, had been trailing the Chinese task force at a depth of 400 feet, completely undetected. Above them, at 45,000 feet, 2 RQ-180 stealth reconnaissance drones had been mapping every electronic emission from the Chinese ships. Captain Mitchell's response was swift and calculated. She authorized Operation Lightning Shield, a non-lethal demonstration of overwhelming superiority designed to make the Chinese task force realize they were outmatched without firing a single shot. The first phase began at 4:47:18 a.m., exactly 18 seconds after the radar lock. The Ford's AN/SLQ 32 V6 suite, nicknamed SEWIP Block 3, is the most advanced electronic warfare system ever deployed at sea. It can generate 16 megawatts of directed electromagnetic energy, enough to overload and destroy sensitive electronics at ranges exceeding 20 kilometers. At Captain Mitchell's command, the system targeted the Nanchang's radar arrays with a focused electromagnetic pulse. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to force an automatic shutdown of their fire control systems to prevent circuit burnout. Within 3 seconds, the Nanchang's Type 366 radar went dark. Then her Type 346B search radar flickered and died. Her data links to the other ships in the task force turned to static. For all intents and purposes, the most advanced destroyer in the Chinese Navy had just become electronically blind and deaf. But this was just the beginning. The Ford's EA-18G Growlers, orbiting at 25,000 feet, activated their ALQ-99 jamming pods. These systems flooded the electromagnetic spectrum with so much interference that the Chinese ships couldn't even communicate with each other on encrypted channels. The Hefei tried to switch to backup frequencies. They were already jammed. The Yinchuan attempted to use satellite communications, also blocked. Within 45 seconds, 5 Chinese warships were operating in complete electronic isolation, unable to coordinate or even warn each other about what was happening. As the Chinese crews scrambled to restore their systems, the second phase of Lightning Shield began. The USS New Jersey, a Virginia-class attack submarine that had been stalking the task force for 3 days, executed an emergency ballast blow at 4:48 a.m. The 7,900-ton submarine erupted from the depths just 800 meters behind the Nanchang. As she surfaced, her crew opened the outer doors of tubes 1 through 4, each loaded with Mark 48 ADCAP torpedoes. These weapons can sprint at 55 knots and carry 650 pounds of high explosives, enough to break any destroyer's keel with a single hit. The message was crystal clear. We've been here all along. You never knew. We could have sunk you at any time. Chinese sonar operators, who pride themselves on their submarine detection capabilities, were stunned. Their Type 206 towed array sonar, supposedly able to detect submarines at 100 kilometers, had completely missed a 377-foot-long nuclear submarine sitting in their wake for 72 hours. But the New Jersey wasn't done. As she sat on the surface, her crew raised an American flag and transmitted a single message on international maritime frequencies. "Good morning, Nanchang. Beautiful day for sailing, isn't it?" The third and most dramatic phase began at 4:48:45 a.m. 6 F-35C Lightning II fighters, which had been loitering at 43,000 feet with their radar reflectors turned off, suddenly appeared on Chinese radar screens. These weren't just any fighters. They were from VFA 147, the Argonauts, the Ford's premier strike squadron. Each F-35C costs $117 million and carries the AN/APG-81 AESA radar, capable of tracking a golf ball-sized object at 150 kilometers. The fighters descended to 15,000 feet and formed a perfect circle around the Chinese task force, each maintaining exactly 8 kilometers distance. At this range, their AEM-120D AMRAAM missiles could reach any ship in under 20 seconds. But instead of targeting the ships, the F-35s did something unprecedented. They activated their distributed aperture systems and began broadcasting real-time infrared footage of the Chinese vessels directly to their bridge displays. The message was psychological. We can see everything you're doing. every crew member on deck, every weapon system, every movement. One F-35, call sign Argonaut Lead, performed a low pass over the Nanchang at just 500 feet, its F-135 engine thundering at over 150 decibels. The sonic shock rattled windows and set off car alarms on the Chinese destroyer. As it pulled up, the pilot activated the aircraft's internal gun, firing a burst of 25mm blanks into the empty ocean, close enough for the Chinese crew to see the splash pattern. At 4:50 a.m., Captain Mitchell authorized the final phase. The Ford turned into the wind and began launching aircraft at her maximum rate, one every 45 seconds. In just 10 minutes, she put 14 aircraft into the sky: Super Hornets, Growlers, and E-2D Hawkeyes. Each aircraft took a specific position around the Chinese task force, creating what military tacticians call a wall of eagles, an impenetrable sphere of American air power. The psychological impact was devastating. In less than 15 minutes, the Chinese naval commander had gone from believing he had the advantage to realizing he was completely surrounded and outmatched. But the Ford saved her most impressive display for last. At 4:52 a.m., she launched two FA-18 Super Hornets carrying something special, a GM-158CLR ASM missiles. These stealthy, AI-guided ship killers can navigate autonomously, communicate with each other to coordinate attacks, and are virtually impossible to stop once launched. The Super Hornets didn't fire them. Instead, they flew a demonstration pattern, showing the Chinese exactly what would happen if they did. The flight path took them through the optimal launch positions for engaging every ship in the task force simultaneously. The message: we could end this in 30 seconds if we wanted to. At 4:53 a.m., the commander of the Chinese task force, Rear Admiral Chen Wei, made the only rational decision available. He ordered all ships to stand down from combat stations and turn west, away from the Ford. But first, he had to solve a problem. His ships still couldn't communicate. The American electronic warfare was so complete that he had to use signal lamps, technology from World War I, to relay orders to his fleet. As the Chinese ships began their turn, the Ford's electronic warfare ceased. Communications were restored. Radars flickered back to life. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and returned their combat systems to normal. The demonstration of control was perhaps more intimidating than the jamming itself. The New Jersey submerged as suddenly as she had appeared, vanishing beneath the waves in less than 60 seconds. The F-35s climbed back to altitude and disappeared from radar. Within 10 minutes, it was as if the entire demonstration had never happened, except for the shaken Chinese crews and the hundreds of gigabytes of sensor data proving American superiority. The entire encounter lasted just 6 minutes and 47 seconds. No shots were fired, no lives were lost, no ships were damaged. Yet it was one of the most decisive naval confrontations of the 21st century. Pentagon analysis later revealed the strategic impact. The Chinese Navy immediately recalled all Type 055 destroyers to port for emergency electronic warfare upgrades. 3 destroyer captains were relieved of command for failing to maintain tactical awareness. Most significantly, Chinese naval patrols in the Taiwan Strait decreased by 60% over the following month. The technological lessons were even more sobering for Beijing. Their most advanced destroyer, equipped with supposedly state-of-the-art defensive systems, had been rendered combat ineffective in 3 seconds. Their anti-submarine warfare capabilities, which they'd spent billions developing, had completely failed to detect an American submarine that had been following them for days. International reactions were swift. Japan and Australia issued statements praising the professional restraint shown by U.S. forces. The Philippines announced increased naval cooperation with the U.S. Even traditionally neutral Singapore noted the impressive display of maritime capability. But perhaps the most telling response came from within China itself. Leaked communications from the PLA Navy's Submarine Academy included a new mandatory course, Lessons from the November 23rd Incident. The course materials reportedly begin with a simple statement: assume American submarines are always present. On November 23, 2024, the USS Gerald R and her strike group delivered a masterclass in naval supremacy without firing a single weapon in anger. In just 6 minutes and 47 seconds, they demonstrated electronic warfare capabilities that could blind any fleet, submarine operations that remain undetectable, and air power projection that can appear from nowhere. The message to Beijing was clear: the Pacific remains an American lake, and any attempt to challenge that reality will be met with overwhelming technological superiority. The $13 billion invested in the Ford proved its worth not through destruction, but through deterrence, the highest form of military victory. For military strategists studying this encounter, 3 lessons stand out. First, electronic warfare has become as decisive as kinetic weapons. Second, submarine stealth remains America's most potent naval advantage. And third, the psychological impact of demonstrated superiority can achieve strategic goals without bloodshed. What's your take on this display of naval power? Do you think China will challenge the US Navy again after this encounter? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more analysis of modern naval confrontations, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Next week, we'll examine how a single US submarine tracked a Russian nuclear ballistic missile submarine for 47 days without being detected. You won't want to miss it.